Purpose of this training video is to show you how to change the default IP address on an Allied Telesis switch that's come out of factory defaults. So I booted up this switch for the first time. It's loaded with factory defaults. It's going to go through a basic assurance test at the moment to verify that the hardware and the software release are good, or it says here okay or bad. And then it'll come up with the default configuration, and it sits there and waits. It sits there and waits until I plug in an Ethernet cable into the switch itself. And then a process occurs where the switch will see if there's a DHCP server on the network. If there is a DHCP server on the network, it will grab an IP address from the DHCP server. It'll wait a certain period of time, and if there is no DHCP server, it'll auto-allocate an IP address. I'm going to pause the recording until we get to the end of the startup process. So you can see that the switch has finished booting up. It's loaded the factory default configuration. I'm now going to plug my Ethernet cable from my laptop into any of the ports, copper ports of the switch itself. So let me plug in. I'm plugging into port number 2 of my switch. And now the switch will see that there's a link on the switch so that the VLAN 1 is now active. The switch will now look for a DHCP server. And if there is no DHCP server, it'll then go and say, okay, I'm going to allocate a 169.254.42.42 address. And there it is. Let me bring up my Ethernet properties. And this is the way I do it on Windows 10 machines. I select Ethernet, change adapter options. There. Change the properties of it. And I go to IPv4 and select properties. And I've got no IP address there. I don't need any IP address there. My PC or a Macintosh will actually come up with an auto-config IP address. So I should be able to get directly into my switch without even having to allocate an IP address. You can confirm it by looking at your IP config under the command line /all. I'm going to close that up and now try to get in. Now, the reason why I've got the PuTTY session up is actually so you could see the boot process. But I'm not really using PuTTY to assign an IP address to the switch. So let me go to the switch now, 169.254.42.42. And you can see I've done this before. And here we go. The GUI comes up. I log in as manager, and the password is friend. But for security reasons, we don't show you the password. And that is the IP address of the switch at the moment. Every time I make a configuration change to the switch itself, that change occurs immediately. So let me go to management and edit VLAN 1, because by default, whether it's my switch or anyone else's switch, all ports in a managed switch are in VLAN 1 by default. So all I do is highlight it if I want to, or just delete one character at a time and put in my IP address, 192.168.10.230. This switch happens to 230. So I'm going to have my last octet being 230. /24 is a 24-bit subnet mask, or 255.255.255.0. Now, this will stay like that forever. I can cancel it if I wanted to, or close it. I'll cancel it. But the change has already occurred. The switch now is at a different IP address. So this screen is absolutely invalid. I can click save, but nothing will happen because my switch isn't at this IP address anymore. So now I have to go back and alter my Ethernet settings and go to my copper Ethernet card, change its properties, change the IPv4 properties, and use an IP address that's in the same network as my switch itself. And I'm going to do 10.111. Boom. Okay. Okay. Close that off. Close that off. And now go to the new IP address so I can save the change that was made previously, because I haven't saved my IP address of my switches yet. Now I'm back in the GUI of my X230, and it's the same for any of the switches that you have. Manager and friend, whether it's a chassis-based solution or one of our lower-end GS970s, the process is identical. Once the machine has a factory defaulted configuration. If I look at the network infrastructure and look at interface management, I should see the new IP address there, which is what I set before. Now I can save the configuration. Once I press the save on the top right-hand side, it saves the configuration to the flash memory of the switch, so that the switch can now, after a reboot, come up with that IP address every time it reboots. And that is the process. Thank you very much.